I want to go to my next guest, the man himself with the Hawaiian shirt. I am so jealous of that shirt. Carl Ja, how you doing, man? You doing okay?
I'm doing great, Jamar. Thank you for asking. My wife bought me these shirts. I asked him to get me a different shirt for every day of the week, so I will always wear a different style but t-shirt for your show, Jamal.
Well, I appreciate it, and I love that shirt. I'm not joking. I love that shirt. Carl Ja, he is host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. Um, and one of the most knowledgeable people on the subject matter that I've come across. And I always appreciate you joining me. I always learn something in these interviews.
Thank you.
I have to get to it's Victory Day, and I've been watching some of the parades. And one of the interesting things has been what seems to be the relationship between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. They seem to be getting closer and closer as time goes on. And a lot of that is provoked by the West, right? They've been just pushing these countries together. So, one of the things in the parade that a lot of Americans may not know is the sacrifice that China made in that war. And this is China Red Square. Go into the sacrifice that China made in that war fighting the Japanese. I mean, it was significant that Japan was a monster. Like, I know we talk about the Nazis and the Germans, but Jesus, the stuff that Japan was doing was just outlandish. Go into the number of Chinese that died in that war and the outcomes, like the consequences of that war in regards to China.
Well, 20 million plus. That's the figure of
Wow.
total number of Chinese military and civilians who perished during the World War II. So this is a big deal for China, and and a lot of Americans are not aware because the American knows this history as we saved China from the Japanese. But in fact, Soviet Union was actually quite pivotal in ending the Japanese occupation of China because in August 9th, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan. This is right after the United States dropped the first atomic bomb in
Mhm.
Hiroshima, and this 1.5 million Soviet Red Army roll across the border into Manchuria, and
That's
within a
right.
matter of a month, they steamrolled the Japanese Kwantung Army. They pushed all the way to the Korean Peninsula, and that's where the State Department in Washington start panicking a little bit. They're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. If the Red Army keep pushing, they're going to take the entire Korea. So they made a phone call to Kremlin and say, okay, let's work out a deal. How about you take everything north of 38th parallel, and we'll take care of the people south of 38th parallel. And this Red Army stopped because at that time Stalin was very accommodating to Americans. He kind of like this. What happened in Greece too? He basically like Greece. Okay, you can that can be part of Western Alliance, and so this has led to the division of Korea essentially because Americans
Mhm.
came in and instead of a purge of all the Japanese collaborators from the government, they keep everybody in place. So everybody in Southern Korea is like, wait a minute, what kind of liberation is this? The same people are still in charge, and this actually led to a uprising that happened before the Korean War started because the two sides half of the Korea they wanted to have a unified government. There was a formation of a People's Republic of Korea, and United States did not like that at all. They think it's a communist takeover. That started the crackdown, and this is really predates the Korean War. People think Korean War is just when North Korea rolled into South Korea. It actually started with American occupation of southern half of Korea. But for China, this is equally important because what happened when the Soviet Red Army occupied Manchuria, that allowed the communist forces to send 100,000 troops into Manchuria, and they start taking over because the Soviet Red Army, they're not interested in running a Chinese city. They're not interested to actually administer every day of Chinese cities. So they let all the communists run the show, basically taking over the Manchurian city administrations. And
Mhm.
that, built the basis later for the Chinese Civil War when KMT, with the backing of the United States, tried to come to Manchuria and take over. At that time, most of the Chiang Kai-shek's army was in the southwestern China, and Japan had occupied like about one third of China at the time.
Wow.
And when Japan surrendered, it was a rush to see who can go accept Japanese surrender first. It was a rush between the communist side and the KMT side. So the KMT side, the Chiang Kai-shek side, was held by United States. So they would board U.S. Navy ships in Hong Kong, and U.S. and will transport them on the U.S. Navy ships all the way to northern China to grab the northern Chinese cities before the communists moved in.
Wow.
Communists were a lot closer because they were already entrenched in the countryside of northern China. They just don't control the big cities. The Japanese had controlled the big cities and the major rail lines, and so this led to the Chinese Civil War, and led to the communist victory in 1949. And kind of heard about this for a long time because in 1946, after the war, the U.S. actually moved the headquarters of the Seventh Fleet to China. A lot of people don't know this. The U.S. Seventh Fleet headquarters was in Qingdao, China, and U.S. sent 60,000 troops to China. Ostensibly was to accept the Japanese surrender, to ship all the Japanese civilians and surrender troops back to Japan. But really,
Mhm.
their other mission was to help Chiang Kai-shek took over. And so that this kind of the American intervention in the Chinese Civil War very early on. Later, that led to when Chiang Kai-shek fled to Taiwan,
Right.
America, and when the Korean War break out, Sherman sent the U.S. Seventh Fleet into the Taiwan Strait to prevent the crossing of Taiwan Strait by the People's Liberation Army. So that directly led to kind of the separate status of Taiwan until today. I mean, so this whole everything traced to the end of World War II. And of course, end of World War II was also when Taiwan was returned from Japan, because before World War II, during World War II, Taiwan was a Japanese colony, and at the
Mhm.
end of the World War II, Japan had to give up all its colonial positions in Taiwan, Korea, etc. And so Taiwan Island was returned to China, but then Chinese Civil War broke out. So when you the KMT government fled to Taiwan and entrenched themselves there. An American military intervention in the Taiwan Strait meant, you know, Taiwan Island and mainland China remain separate till this day, and Taiwan is still effectively a client state of the United States. So this is all kind of related to the aftermath of the World War II. And as for atrocity that Japan did, people can look up Nanjing Massacre, and they
Yeah.
can look up Unit 731. That's where Japanese perform human experimentations on prisoners, live prison. They would perform stuff like vivisection, which when they cut up their prisoners while they're still alive to see how their organs are reacting to the experiment they perform on. So these are very horrific stuff, and these Chinese people never forget about it. So this when Xi Jinping goes to Moscow and stress the bond that was forged during the anti-fascist struggle. This just not an empty statement. This is they're talking about
Yeah.
historical fact. But the interesting thing is when Xi Jinping mentioned this, he also made allusion to the present. He's talking about present in the present we're also facing danger of countries practicing unilateralism and bullying others. I mean, he's effectively compared to United States
Yeah.
to the Nazis,
Yeah.
and the fat Japanese fascists. But way worse a lot. U.S. is supporting the genocide right now via Israel in Gaza, and
Yeah.
and they have been bombing Yemen, the one country that stood up and said no more genocide there will be no more shipping through Red Sea until the genocide stops. And and of course, that what a spectacular failure that has been. United States lost 3 aircraft F-18s, against a country with no air force. I mean,
I
this
know.
is this.
I know.
Yet many never find out why we don't have healthcare, Jamar. They never find out.
I mean, there's another reason too, though. The Germans, Nazis looked at themselves as being exceptional. We're somehow better just because we're better. It's almost like God made us better than everybody else. And the U.S. uses this notion of we're exceptional, we're the indispensable nation. That rhetoric is very similar if you really think about it.
Actually, Hitler looked up to the United States as a model. Like he thought you like United States, the whole manifest destiny, the westward expansion. He thought that was like his whole predecessor to his expanding the Lebensraum for the Germanic people, right? And so in many ways, Hitler looked up to the United States as a role model. These are well documented. Like I'm not making stuff up. People.
No, you're not making it up. He even made the argument. He was kind of like, yeah, who remembers the U.S. murdering all the Native Americans? Nobody. Like basically, in 200 years, nobody's going to remember that these people were genocided, or at the very least, it's not going to matter. And so, if we do this to the Jews and the Russians in 200 years, if we win, who's going to care? Like he was making these very similar arguments. And by the way, he's not entirely wrong. Like we are aware of what we did to the Native Americans, but it doesn't factor into anything. I mean, hell, we even have Thanksgiving where we act like the Native Americans is serving corn and turkey to the pilgrims. And that's what we're learning in school, right? Like it's just
I remember that.
Yeah, it's just wild. It's just very wild. Thank you for that. Because I don't think many people know that. Like it's not something we're taught. We even call it the forgotten war. And when we learn about this stuff, we learn about it in the context of the U.S. coming to the rescue, saving the day, helping the Soviets, helping the Brits, helping the French. But it was us. It was MacArthur.
Trump said we won the war. Trump has said basically United States won World War II. We did all the heavy lifting. We did everything, right? But if you actually look at the numbers, the majority of the Nazi army was fighting the Soviet in the Eastern Front. I mean, Soviet Union really did heavy lifting here. I mean, of course, United States helped. They were allies. United States supplied Soviets through land and lease, but still, it doesn't negate the fact that the main manpower was the Soviet Red Army that crushed the Nazis' war machine, and also Japan. 2/3 of the Japanese Imperial Army was tied down in mainland China. They were got themselves into a quagmire situation where they can't leave, they can't extricate themselves because Chinese people never gave up. The resistance went on for more than 8 years. And, because people think World War II in Europe and United States is taught the World War II started in 1939 when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. Well, for the Chinese people, the war started way, way early. I mean, they started in 1931 when Japan annexed Manchuria. And then the war kind of never stopped. But it got intensified in 1937 when Japan took over Beijing and started the Battle of Shanghai. So this happened way before Nazi invasion of Poland, and in Stalingrad, I mean the Battle of Shanghai, some call it like the Stalingrad of the East. There's a huge number of army were involved. Chinese throw in 750,000 men try to defend Shanghai. They put a hell of a fight, and that when Japan finally was able to push through Shanghai, the Japanese Imperial Army was so angry that it was not a cakewalk and they weren't welcome with flowers. This is why they made the decision to commit the massacre in Nanjing, because Nanjing was the capital of China at that time. So because they suffered such a great loss in the Battle of Shanghai, they decided to take it out on the civilians of Nanjing. So I mean, Chinese people never forget that.
And we never learned that stuff. Like I would tell you, I went through school not knowing that China was a major factor in that war. And it was only like later, as I became an adult and reading about the war, was like, hey, China was heavily involved in that conflict. Like it's it's not taught here. It's the weirdest thing in the world. And so I love the fact that Xi Jinping is there in order to shine a light spotlight. Like, yes, we were there. We were fighting that war too. We lost 20 million or more people in that conflict. Every bit as much as you all. Thank you for that, Carl. I deeply appreciate that. Like I said, I learn something new every time